We are live. Alafia Mandala, Baby Fahoudie. It's your favorite warrior, Black Panther, in the building once again with my comrade, my old guy, and now Godfather.
Yeah.
Ogundiran. Yeah, I want to make you uncomfortable as possible.
Thanks. Appreciate the love.
What's going on with you over there, Bob?
Doing well. Just trying to adjust to this weather that don't want to make it bind up. So, but I'm doing well.
Well, you know, Virginia get all 8 seasons of weather
In 2 days.
Yeah, because you get 4 twice, so it's 8.
Right.
You know,
exactly.
I know I've been gone for a minute, family. Been traveling, been doing this, doing that. Started writing my book. Will be out before the end of this year. It is called African Spirituality for the African Diaspora. That will come out before this year is concluded. Putting a lot of work into it, not rushing it. It's just something that I've been, taking my time and working on. Peace, brother in here, Red. My brother, as always, Mossy brother Infinite Minds, peace. Brother Lamar Pope, peace. Appreciate everybody for tuning in. Appreciate everybody for coming out. This is a continuation of our Isheshe lecture series in which we go over random topics that are dedicated to the Sheshe Lagba tradition of Òrìṣà worship coming out of West Africa, particularly southwestern Nigeria. So today we have a topic that I think is very pertinent on our community, is something that I think a lot of people should think about. And that is how to apply a divination to your life. Lots of people get divinations in the Òrìṣà, communities, the various Òrìṣà communities. Lots of people go for divinations. Lots of people engage in wanting a divination. And that's one of the first things that come out of a lot of people's mouths. But today we want to talk about some of the mechanisms within what divination, is designed to do, what it is for, what is divination. We're going to go over those types of questions today. Please like, share, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Share this knowledge with our people so we can get that out there. Brother Keenan Wright, appreciate you coming out. I know I would say Lyman Brown, appreciate that. Pure Black, appreciate that. So we're gonna jump right into it. Baba Ogundiran.
Yes, sir.
What is a divination, or what some people call a reading?
Well, I like to more call it a divination versus a reading. Because a reading kind of implies, and this is not taking anything away from this, but like tarot cards, crystal balls, those are the things I kind of refer to as readings because they predominantly, from my understanding, just give information. Nothing wrong with that. But within the Yoruba oracle system, the oracle just does not provide just information. It provides an antidote. It provides an antidote to your problem, or let's say a solution for you to try to obtain what you're trying to obtain. So it's just not information based. There is like what we call a prescription that you will be given, which we know as a bowl, for which to perform to be able to fulfill whatever blessing you're trying to obtain or whatever misfortune you are trying to avert.
Absolutely. Honestly, a lot of people ask me that question. What's the difference, between tarot cards, gypsy readings, other types of divination, what they call divinations from other traditions, and that's the main thing that I see.
That
African
another one is also outside of, at least when it comes to most of them, most of these systems are predominantly based in knowledge. there seems to be some misunderstanding that spirituality plays or intuition plays a lot of a big role within it. It has its moments that that's it's not a it's in there, but predominantly it's knowledge. These are knowledge-based traditions. So there's a lot of learning as you can begin to understand that.
Yeah, a lot of learning. He's definitely not lying with that. And like we said, it seems in African traditions when we talk about divinations, there is a solution, a remedy, an antidote. Whereas in other systems will kind of tell you, hey, you're gonna get sick, and that's it. You know, you're gonna get sick. You be like, wait, can I do something about this? Is there something? You know, it's not a lot. It's not solution oriented in my experience. So that's a key takeaway right there. So how important is divination in the practice that we know as Isheshe Lagba?
Absolutely fundamental. That's basically about as clear cut as I can put it. It is fundamental to the overall traditions and among the Yoruba people. Normally, depending on the tradition, divination starts typically 3 days after you're born, where you get an estentaye done, which means your first steps into the world. And this is generally done as a roadmap for your parents to guide the child and best how to rear the child. That child gets the most benefits out of life. You see what I'm saying? So even from the very beginning, divination is there. Divination is done during like every festival for every Òrìṣà. It's an intricate part of the tradition.
So you mentioned your first steps into the world, so and so days after you get a divination. How about when you exit this world, so to speak?
Yes, there's a divination there. There's several types of divination. There's like we have Ebo Aiku, which is typically done in Oyo, which is like an atonement kind of divination for when the I'm trying to think for when the dry season comes in, I believe, because sickness is thought to come around then. So there's all types of divination for many things. Every initiation has some type of divination, not always the same type of divination, but they will have some type of divination. When people get married, there's a divination. When families get together, there's a divination. Funerals, there's divinations. It's rampant all over the place.
Wow. So just for the listening audience and those not too familiar, what are the and I've limited to 3. If you want to go past 3, by all means. Okay. What are the 3 main divinations in Isheshe Lagba?
Okay, well, I wouldn't say 3 main. I'd say the 3 most known, at least within the diaspora.
You know what I'm getting at.
Ifa divination, which consists of either the Ikim or the Opele. Then you have the 16 karat shell divination, which is the Eredilogun or the Idasa. And then you have kola nut divination. Now, kola nut divination can be kind of confusing because there's several types of methods of kola nut divination. So you have divination with kola nut where it's just used for worship. And then you have kola nut divination that's used for consultation. But these are like the 3 main. Some, to name a few others, like among the Osain priests, they have like a talking, for lack of a better word, I'm just going to say fetish, for which the priest interprets the squeaks and bird-like sounds during their type of divination. The Egbe Ogba or the Egbo Arun have their own form of divination where their priests kind of like go into a sleep type of trance, and then they wake up and provide the information that is necessary to the client. As well as they have water divination, they have palm reading. There is a bunch of types of divination throughout Yoruba land. We get a very small pigeonhole of what is actually there. Okay, I think there's a lag in the screen time. You still there? Okay, I can't hear you now. What's up? Your mic is off.
wait. Can you hear me now?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
So I don't know where we left off.
I know it was a bit choppy, a little bit on my end. I don't know if it was on your end.
Yeah, it is, but I also saw the your mic thing went dead. I could see it on my side. So
You can see it on your side?
yeah, not anymore. That's why I knew your mic was off.
It's a little bit choppy. Let's
Everything.
see what we can do about that. Can you hear me all right?
Oh yeah, perfectly.
Okay. I know you mentioned some divination systems there. So when getting a divination, no matter
Well, hold
what
on.
type of divination you're getting, describe, what's happening here. What's happening in the divination?
Oh, you mean like how the communication's coming and where the information is being derived from? You're on mute again. You muted your mic. There you go.
Yes.
Okay. So the diviner himself or herself plays as the well, okay, so let me back up. So if it's Ifa divination, of course the it's going to be Orunmila that's presiding over the diviner. If it's attached to like the seashell divination, the 16 card shells, whatever divinity that the shells are attached to is the one that's being the divinity that's providing over the divination itself. So the information
Okay.
when we
I'm back.
well, you're back now. Okay. So the information itself is supposedly, at least according to the at least in Ifa, the Odu Ogbedi, the information comes directly from Olodumare and translated through the diviner. So how it works is, at least in major forms of divination where you have Odus and verses, from my understanding, is what we're really doing is reading your lot in life or your head. And that information that's applied to your lot is actually coming from Olodumare. Does that make sense? Okay. I don't know if he's here. I think he disappeared, folks. Anyway, I'll just keep going. So typically when we divine and we ask, we're coming into to ask, we mention the client's name, we ask what the or we tell the divination. When we're divining, we tell what the client is there for. And that information is, like I said, supposedly based on that person's lot, and Olodumare provides the actual information. Now, the inspiration between the divine, or the inspiration of the diviner, will choose what verses necessarily apply to that particular situation that they have come for divination for. But I'm going to stop here until I realize where you went. Ah, there you are. Folks, I think
Sorry
we're
about
having
that.
technical difficulties. Okay, what'd you do there?
I switched it to my phone.
Ah, okay. Working out better now?
Give me 1 second.
Yeah. Oh, we probably got the echo from the.
Okay. You can hear me now?
I can hear you.
All right. Let's get back to business. I assume you answered that question. So if you didn't answer this part, as far as, because people always ask me, where's this information coming from? You know, is it coming from the diviner? Is it coming from the oracle? Like, what's the relationship there? I don't know if you've
Okay.
answered that, but if you didn't, can you speak to that?
Kind of indirectly. Okay, so the information realistically is going to come from the diviner. I mean, before we get any type of how the information, where it's coming from, it's going to come from the diviner and his training or her training, and how many verses this particular person has per each will do. So a lot of times, let's suppose a particular Odu comes up, and then we might have a certain number of verses per that Odu. So let's say we have 10. At that moment, we're probably not going to remember all 10 verses.
Right.
So what happens in that time and the verses that we do remember, and according to what the divination is about, we will choose from the verses that we remember that come to our mind at that time. This is kind of where the spirituality comes in, but it's based in knowledge because you have to have a knowledge base of verses. But this is also kind of saying that these verses that appear at that time is kind of like an inspiration, or it's supposed to be coming from Olodumare. And it's based on the reading of your lot in life, like your head, your destiny.
Got it.
The best of my understanding.
All right. Understood. Moving forward. So who are the people that, you know, you talked about the oracle systems earlier, or the divination systems earlier. Who are some people that are qualified to do some of these divinations?
Okay, now this is going to be kind of tricky. So let's first start off with the simplest answer. People that have been trained and graduated from whatever divinity and whatever oracle system they're attached to. So if you're an Ifa practitioner, you become a Babalao or an Anifa, then of course, if properly trained, you have the right to do these type of divinations. Right. The same thing it is with the seashell, the 16 karat shell divinations, the same thing. Now, there are some exceptions to this. So typically, or what's supposed to be done, is you're under apprenticeship, at least for Ifa and 16 karat shell divination. These two divination systems have a lot of information to it. They both carry Odus and number of verses. So sometimes if you're going through the apprenticeship process and you've made it to a certain level, your master might allow you to divine, though you might not be graduated yet.
Got it. He'll be kind of like the supervising authority.
Right. But you're under a supervising authority.
Right.
So if your master says, no, you got to cut that out, you got to cut that out. Masters are different from one person to the next. Some people will allow you, you know, that they feel confident that you can. Some people will say, no, you got to have the entire thing. It just really depends on person to person. Understood. But at least you have to have enough content to divine, and that takes time.
Because you have to memorize the verses.
Right. So roughly, you'll probably spend about, at least in seashell divination, probably about 5 years learning verse content.
Right.
Probably about another 10 or like 10 to Ifa. And that's just verse content. We haven't got into the other stuff you have to learn.
Right.
Like
speaking of the other stuff that we have to learn, because you mentioned it earlier as far as Ebo. Talk about the relationship with Ebo and divination and its importance.
Okay, so after the divination is done, and this is particularly, this can be done with Ifa, the 16 karat shells, and in some extent, the koan when it's used in a consultation fashion, not a worship fashion. That would not apply. So after the reading is done, you're going to get a listing of objects and items and information. These listing of objects and items are what we call the antidote. This is what we call the Ebo. After the reading is done, there's another process you have to go through to fulfill that kind of prescription, which is called a Riru. Both Ifa has it, and both the Eledi Rogun have it. So in this process, it's really about fulfilling that prescription. it's prayers on top of prayers on top of prayers on top of prayers. Various about different types of things, but the main focus, there will always be type of a main focus for the Ebol. And of course, there will be other prayers that can be said to go along with it. Most Riru takes about 45 minutes. It is a very long process, and can be a lot longer. But after this is normally like what we said, that where we fulfill the prescription. That Ebol at the very end is basically, we ask where it is to be set to be left to Eshu, so Eshu can go disperse it between the right and the left. After this, if there's any animal sacrifices, this is when we would actually do this part of the ritual. So the Riru in the animal sacrifice, though, is kind of all the same work. It's two different processes.
Understood. So I asked all those questions to get the foundation down, just for people that weren't familiar with divination and Ebol and some types of divinations in that sort of manner. But now that we have the foundation down, how do you apply your divination to your life?
Okay, well, this will really depend on what you're getting a divination for. And it will also depend on the, like, suppose, like, if you get a yearly divination, of course, that information is going to last for the following year. If you kind of get a divination for, let's say, a job, or trying to get a raise or something, or trying to move up in position, that information is going to last probably about 2 or 3 months at the most, or sometimes it might last until you actually get the word. Like, suppose you're going to move and you want to get divination. The Ebol should be done before you actually move. So there might not be necessarily a time limit, if that makes any sense. But as far as the information, outside of the general information that people that will give you that would make sense, like if they said this Òrìṣà, you should do this, or you should avoid doing this, or you're warning to do this. Really, the part that you should really apply, or that takes a little bit of know-how, is when it starts relating to a story, and taking the information from that story and trying to apply it to why you came to divination for. So a lot of times in a lot of verses, the information is up front. There really is no secretness about it. It's very plain, it's very open. And in these type of situations, we really wouldn't have much to try to explain, because the verse is just straightforward. But sometimes we get these very complicated stories, or these very in-depth stories where there's a lot of information, and people often get confused on how to take that information in your life. So I'm going to give you an example. So a diviner might come up to you and say, do not trust a friend. For whatever reason, this is the information that comes out. Now they give you in the relationship of the story. So I'm going to really chop up the story just to make it short, because it is actually a long story. So there's this character named Iki, and Iki's a lover of cola nuts. And he has I think it's the goat. No, it's not the goat. Is it? Oh, it's the ram. Excuse me. Iki and the ram are good friends. But one day when the ram was going to decide what to give a present to the king, he decided to betray his friend and offer up Iki as a sacrifice. But Iki was not aware of this, and he had not sought his plan in motion yet. So the ram ends up getting like a kind of like a wooden bowl, and he puts cola nuts in it, and leaves kind of like the wooden top kind of open so you can see the cola nuts. And Iki is a lover of cola nuts. Well, Iki, before that day, ends up getting a divination, and he's warned that, he's going to be betrayed. And now this might be the information of where the client might be warned of being betrayed, or beware of a friend. But in this divination, it tells Iki to wear some bracelets and other information to apply and do his Ebol. Iki ends up doing the Ebol and follows the instructions of it. So one day when Iki is going around, he ends up hearing his name called. And this is from the ram who has set the coconuts out to trap him. He calls Iki's name, but he doesn't. When Iki turns around, he doesn't see the ram. He just sees the coconut. And since he's a lover of coconut, he just runs and goes to get the coconuts. So as he's in there eating coconuts, the ram comes up behind him and traps him in the wooden bowl. Now I'm going to stop here. So this story is explaining exactly how Iki was betrayed. So when someone applies this to their life, other than just saying you're going to be betrayed by a friend, this story gives you clues of how you will be betrayed. And sometimes the manner you will be betrayed in. So the diviner, just from the story, might warn you against not to answer anytime your name is called out loud. Maybe just to turn around, because when they called Iki's name, he immediately saw the coconuts and ran, and this is how he got trapped. Like a lot of times we call someone's name, they're like, what? And they immediately come over. So the story gives a lot of details sometimes of how to apply the information that you're receiving from the Babalao or the person that's reading the priest that's reading the Òrìṣà Divination, and how to apply it to your life. So instead of just saying, I'm going to be betrayed by a friend, you know not to answer to anyone that calls your name. You can turn around, just don't answer. You also know that they're going to try to capture you, in a sense, and put you up for a sacrifice, meaning that they're going to try to use you as a scapegoat or something to give up for a sacrifice to betterment them or push them forward. In the very end of this story, so what ends up happening is he ends up capturing Iki. The goat, the ram is happy. He's carrying Iki in this wooden bowl, and he's walking to the king to try to deliver this offering to him. But what ends up happening is Eshu ends up seeing what happened. And since he knows that Iki made the sacrifice, he causes the goat to trip over a rock or some object. The bowl comes flying out, and then Iki leaves the bowl. But the ram did not see Iki. He thought he made it just in time to catch him in the bowl, and he kind of shook the bowl. And what he heard is the bracelets that Iki was wearing.
So he thought he was still in the bowl.
He thought he was still in the bowl. So as we go out, or as he continues to the king, to make a very long story short, he ends up presenting himself in front of the king. He gives this king this wooden bowl. And the king opens it and is horrified. He said, why would you give me my taboo? My taboo is to not look into a wooden bowl with brass bracelets.
Oh, wow.
Because of this, he ends up being sacrificed. And it's one of the stories of where it explains why we give the ram to Egungun. Because the
so
king
is it
was
safe to say that if you perform what's required of you, that you take you're the person, you're Iki, and the person that tries to trap you will end up being
sacrifice himself. You'll switch
that's
places.
critical there, because there's a lot of critical thinking in the way that you broke that down. You know, people, you know, we're human beings. We look at things literally. That's just what we do. But to look at it from that perspective, you know, this is why we do sacrifice, no matter what it is. You know, if it's 12 peanuts, you know, this is why we do it. It may seem odd, but as you just explained, the stories are what's important, and that is how you can start piecing this together to apply this to your life. Am I correct in that?
Right. Or apply it to the situation of why you came to divination for. Correct.
And that's the other side of the coin. because we don't know, in that example, let's say he came because he thought his friend was going to betray him, or he felt something about his friend, or he felt like, someone was plotting against him, and then you get that story and you're like, oh,
Right. And
and
there's other information in this will do. Okay, like for instance, the bracelets, the babala, or like I said, the diviner may or tells the client to wear the bracelets, to go wear either 2 on one arm or 4 on the other, as long as they jingle. So kind of like
so that
symbolically,
sound.
right? So when you're walking around, your captors will think that you're captive when you're really not, and that's what the sound is used for. So there's so much information that comes from an Odu that isn't like right up and told to you. This is where training actually comes in for the divine.
But isn't it let's say someone's brand new and they go for a divination, they get a story like this. Is it the diviner's responsibility to paint this picture and relay this message to the client?
Yes.
All right.
And this is why training is so important.
Right.
Because even when you let's say you flip a book open and you're just reading it, it's not going to tell you all the information. It's just not. Matter of fact, you won't even be aware that there's other information because it gives you no clue. Like I said, some verses are very straightforward. There's not much to them. There is no big, strong interpretation, and they might not even have a story attached. Some verses are a lot more longer with a lot more intricate detail. It just really depends on what comes up during that time.
So some verses require some sort of decoding, basically,
yes,
of what the information is telling you. And if you're that diviner, you have to decode that and relay that information to your client in a way that he can interpret it and understand what's going on.
Right. So for an example, there's nothing in the verse that tells you that you need to wear bracelets.
But a diviner with training
will know.
Suggest that
will tell you.
He will tell you you need to wear bracelets.
It's part of it to go along with the abo. It's part of the instruction.
And that's a key part of that prescription. So to leave that out would be kind of, leaving it incomplete.
I would say malpractice.
This is serious stuff, y'all. This is we got a problem in our community that, if you listen to my channel, you've heard me address it before. We got problems, people getting initiated and claiming that they're priest, but as Baba Ogundiran just broke down, you have to get the training because you can miss little things like that. And then the other problem we have is people that are not even initiated trying to do priestly acts. So they can't tell you at all how to do what Baba Ogundiran just pointed out. You were going to say something, Baba?
Oh, so what I also want to make a clear distinction on, a priest does not necessarily need to be a Babala. A priest does not necessarily need to be a diviner. When it comes to Ifa, they're synonymous with one another. But when it comes to other divinities, not so much. Where divination seems to be more of a specialization, from my understanding, more than attached to the priesthood. That make sense?
Yes. So you're saying priests of different divinities have different functions.
Okay, so like if we take like let's say Ashun, for instance.
Right.
An Ashun priest does not need to know how to divine with 16 card shells.
And to be clear, that would be the option for her to be a diviner.
Right. If she wanted to become a diviner and take that specialization on. Yes.
So you can't be an Ashun priest and be an Ifa diviner.
Say that again?
I said, so you can't be an Ashun priest and try to divine the way an Ifa diviner would. Like
Unless
with
you're
Okele.
trained and initiated to Ifa, then no.
Okay.
You know. But to make it clear, from my understanding, when you be like with Ifa, this is the only one that seems to do this. If you want to be a priest of Orunmila, you have to be a diviner, and this is probably because of his function. He is the oracle among the divinities.
Right.
So to
But with
become a
Ashun,
priest,
that wouldn't be a requirement.
no, it's not a requirement to become a priest. And that's what I'm trying to make a very clarity on. Not all divinities that are considered priests will be know how to do 16 cowrie shells. There's a lot of other things for them to specialize in other than 16 cowrie shell divination. That training takes a long time. So I don't want it to someone say, oh, if I'm going to be an Ashun priest, I have to study 16 cowrie shell divination. That's not true. It's not true with Shango. From my understanding, it's not true with Obatala. Just with Ifa.
But there's other things that they would know in their like knowledge wheelhouse that would make them a priest of these other divinities, as far as other Orisha are concerned, other than Ifa.
Well, yeah, because they all have their own specializations and their own things that they do. All of them are not the same. I know I've noticed that in the diaspora, everything seems to be very cookie cutter.
What do you mean by cookie cutter?
So it's like everything's the same. We just change colors. We change numbers. Every divinity has a set of 16 cowrie shells. Every divinity we do this for, and that's just not true. So Ogun's tradition per se does not have 16 cowrie shells in it fundamentally. That's not to say that people in West Africa, in Nigeria, and some Ogun practitioners don't do cowrie shell divination or 16 cowrie shell divination when they're attached to a family. That this is true. It's not doesn't make it wrong, but when you talk about the fundamentals of his tradition, it's not there. It was added on later for whatever reason. It doesn't make it right or wrong, but his tradition itself, there is no cowrie shell divination. There's no 16 cowrie shell divination. Like if someone gets
what
initiated,
divination system would be attached to Ogun traditionally?
the Obi Banjan, the Obi Obata, Orobo, and in some traditions, the Atare.
So basically, kola nut divinations and atare.
Mm-hmm.
And if for people that don't know what atare is, that's what they call the alligator peppers.
Yes.
Is that what they call? Yeah, the alligator peppers.
And just to be clear, I'm not going to get into this, but no, we don't divine with the seeds.
For people that don't get why he said that, I want you to Google alligator peppers. You'll find they're very, very small seeds, but they come in like these pods that are similar to they're shaped kind of like lobes. So I've had people ask me that before. They're like, well, how do you divine with the seed? No, it's actually the lobes. We got a question in the chat. Oh wow, so you don't have to learn Ifa divination if say you're a child of Shango or Ashun. No.
No. Not at all.
No, you do not.
Mm-hmm.
They have their own divination systems. And as Baba Ogundiran just highlighted, you do not even have to learn those to be considered a priest. There are other things within their traditions that you should learn and have to learn to be considered a priest. And I know I've said on this channel before, but for anyone that's new, every divinity has its own system, its own epistemology, its own library, so to speak, its own things that it does. In the diaspora, we've linked them all together, called it Ifa. But we kind of do these divinities a disservice because they have their own things they do that Ifa diviners or servants of Orunmila do not do, and vice versa. So that's something that comes with just studying knowledge, meeting the right people that will tell you different things, and that's part of why I started this series, to get that kind of information out. you know so
All
we covered
how
that
about
he time. Oh, go ahead, Baba.
um just to add on to what you're saying, yeah, each divinity has its own tradition and can function by itself. It does not need other orishas to come into its thing or its society. They're completely self-extant by themselves. This does not mean that we don't work with one another. I
Right.
think a lot of people, sometimes people go off the deep end and be like, well, no, I'm going to just stick to me and we won't work with anybody else. And it's not like that. Even in the beginning, the divinities worked with each other, but it's not to say that they can't survive without, that they are independent from one another as well as they can work with one another. But it shouldn't be really
Right.
thought of as like they're all separate and we don't interact with one another. That would be a falsehood. But there are some people that
Right.
are kind of pushing that narrative, you know. So I just wanted
That
to
we don't work with each
bring it
other.
to light. So I don't know if you remember a while back, there was a this might have been a year or two ago, maybe a year and a half. There was a, I wish I could remember what state she was in, but there was a young Oya priest that came out in her regalia for Oya for that festival, and there was a lot of comments about the bracelet of Ifa she was wearing at that
Huh.
time. And those who were like, "Oh, I thought she was just Oya. They shouldn't be mixing," and it's
Didn't be
kind of a
mixed.
ridiculous statement.
Wow.
So yeah, it has gone off the I think it's because there's been such a large push um to really try to separate a lot of these orishas from Orumila, or what we commonly say Ifa, because
Mm-hmm.
there seems to be this big thing that Ifa is attached to everything, and
Mm-hmm.
and this is not, this is an Ifa point of view, and there's nothing wrong with the Ifa point of view. It's just Ifa's point of view.
Right.
It might not work out with Shango's point of view.
That's a huge point. Because we talked about Orisha having their own, uh, culture and their own system, but we haven't talked about how sometimes these systems don't say the same thing about the same thing. you know,
Boy.
um, and that's something that um, people probably can't wrap their head around right away. But I just look at it as, if you have two people that saw the exact same accident, one of them's going to tell the story a bit differently.
Mhm.
One of them may tell it completely differently. It just depends on the point of view and what they paid attention to when the accident happened. So, there are stories that are very similar, but told from different point of views of the Orisha's system. So you will encounter that in traditional Orisha worship. That's just what it is. You talked about earlier the stories.
Mhm.
So that's a very important piece in implying the divination to your life. Are there any other elements of the divination to where you can use it to apply to your life?
Um, when you get a divination, all the information should predominantly come from, or should come from, the diviner. Whatever information that diviner passed, whether it's related to the Odu, or if it's something that just came up during that time that he felt that needed to be, or she said that needed to be said. What should not happen, which is common in the diaspora, especially when people get like their hand of Ifa here,
Mm-hmm.
is they'll get their Odu, then they'll basically grab a book
Oh boy.
and they'll try to imply every verse they can find to them. And this is
Guilty.
not correct.
I've done it too.
This is not correct. So only the verses that are applied or chanted at the time of your divination, and anything that the diviner brings up is the information that applies to you. Not every verse under that Odu. That just wouldn't make sense.
So if the diviner chants verse A from AJ Ogbe, you can't go get a book and read about verse B, C, D, and E and try to apply those verses to your life. It don't work like that.
No, it don't work like that. I'm about to say, if you really thought about this logically for a second, this doesn't make sense. So there's an unlimited amount of verses. So let's just say there's 200 verses per each Odu. Hell, let's not even say that. Let's say there's 50. Let's keep it a number that's actually manageable. Do you think that all 50 verses, every time this verse comes up, is going to apply to each and every single person? It might as well be a zodiac sign.
Yeah, it sounds a little
sounds a little sketchy
when you say it like that.
Yeah. So it's not designed that way. So, which brings me up into another point. So when it comes to the Odu of the whatever system you, whether it's the Odu Osha or the Odu Ifa, which is one is the 16 card shell divination, one is Ifa divination. The Odu is not as important as people think it is in most instances. The importance of the Odu is really important to the diviner, not the client, in most circumstances.
So the information is more important than the actual Odu.
The Odu, right? Because the Odu, the reason why it's important to the diviner, because he needs the Odu to do the Riru. This is why they want this is why the Odu is important, but to the actual client, it really doesn't serve any purpose. And one of the ways I can justify this is if you're going to divination and you don't know anything about Òrìṣà, and someone tells you you're Odu, what difference does it make?
Yeah, I don't know what that is anyway.
Right. The information is what's more important. Now, if it was like an Esentaye, like your first steps into the world, this is a little different. When it comes into your Tefa, like your Ifa initiation, this is different. If it comes into some other like Òrìṣà initiation, this is slightly different. But general readings, the Odu is not important to anyone but the diviner.
What about your hand of Ifa?
Okay, so this one's kind of tricky. It depends. Your hand of Ifa is not meant to be a permanent Odu.
Right.
But if you don't go any higher than your hand of Ifa,
it is your permanent Odu.
It has some importance. But it really has more importance in you learning about your content for what that Odu applies to you. So in kind of a way, like that Odu serves as your personal Babalao. I don't want to get too much into it, but it's kind of like a way of like suppose you're doing chanting.
Right.
It's kind of good to get your chants from your own personal Babalao. You see what I'm saying now? But those Odus aren't meant to say, oh, these all apply to me. But there's a different type of training when you as you're being trained as an Ifa practitioner. So it does have some relevance, but it's meant to be temporary.
Okay. We got another question from the chat. When would one get their Ilekes? Ilekes is spelled with an I. Sorry, it's a pet peeve. Yeah. When would one get their Ilekes, if have any, and are they necessary when working with your divinity or divinities?
Okay, since you said plural, I believe what you're referring to is the Calares or the Eleke ceremony that comes out of the Cuban system of Regal de Ocha. This would not apply. There's no such thing as an Eleke ceremony in Isheshe in West Africa. Now, let me say this because I know someone might say, "Well, I've seen it," and you probably have. But these are Nigerians picking up elements from here. not that was something that's fundamental to their practice.
Mm.
So the Aleke ceremony does not exist in West African Òrìṣà.
So how would you get an Aleke in West African Òrìṣà? Because that's going to be the next question.
That's going to be the next question, obviously. So from what I understand, because I think they pretty much do it the same way, because the way I was taught to kind of do it. So typically, if you have an insignia, I'm going to call it an insignia because if we say Aleke, we have this idea of thinking that everything is a bead, and not all insignias are beads.
Right.
So when receiving an insignia, typically when you receive an insignia from someone, it means that you have made a commitment to that person, for that person to be kind of like your mentor in that particular Òrìṣà. This is where you would become a godchild of that particular person. It also serves as an identifier, as a worshiper of that particular Òrìṣà. This particularly happens when people come to worship and show a dedication after a while. It's not typically I receive an Aleke, and everything's kind of fine and dandy. Typically, it takes place over like 3, 4, 5, 6 months, because it needs to see your dedication and see
so you're
whether
earning an Aleke in a sense.
Yes, it's earned. It's not really just given.
Earn, not given.
Now, this is kind of foreign concept here, because most of the times, because of Real de Ocho, they receive the Aleke ceremony, and then you see most people in that tradition wearing a bunch of beads. Right. Where in Isheshe, it tends to be they only wear the insignias of those they actually worship.
So, are Alekes required to work or give offerings or anything like that with a divinity?
Nope.
I know that was part of this question.
They're not required in worship. They're not required to get a divination. They're not required to form any type of sacrifice. No. These things are really it's an insignia to show that that person has dedicated their time and has become devoted in their worship to that divinity. It's why they receive an Aleke, so that divinity can recognize their worshipers.
Understood. If you have any questions, just put them in the chat. Appreciate you all for coming out. I hope that we're getting you some information about West African Òrìṣà practice, which we call Isheshe or Isheshe Lagba, that you can apply to your life if you want to go into the tradition or go further into the tradition and you're interested in the West African narrative of this tradition, because there's many narratives of this tradition because of the transatlantic slave trade and it traveling with our African ancestors. It's in a lot of places and you can get a lot of different varieties. But myself and Ogundiran, we have dedicated ourselves to the root, so to speak, the West African narrative. And this is why I created this interview series. Please take time to look in the description of this video where you'll see links for my journal, both volumes of Killmonger's Corner, Conscious Community's own and only Pan-African journal. We also got the Mboka-Family connected apparel store, which are a connection with our Gambian brothers. We got the 54 deck quiz cards and the 47 deck quiz cards for your kids or yourself, So check those links out below. But like I said, do we have any more questions?
Before we go, there's something I would like to say. I'm surprised the question did not come up, which is a difficult question to answer to. Is how do you know whether a diviner is experienced, or how to choose diviners to get divinations from?
Okay.
How to choose a diviner,
or whether you're not getting got.
Right. Right.
That's basically what you're saying.
Right. And honestly, this is a very difficult question to answer because unless you're a diviner, it's kind of
Yeah.
hard to tell. But and then you'd actually have to go through the process of actually telling. So it's not like you're going to approach a diviner and then look at him and be like, oh, well, he has a red feather and a couple of beads on. He might be the guy I need to go to. You won't know until actually you start getting the divination.
Yeah, it kind of sucks because I get that question
No.
a lot. Um, how do I not get got? What are some things to look for? And I
So
can tell you some surface level stuff, but these people are very crafty. So it might not jump out to you like it jumps out to somebody that's experienced. My best advice would be, just I can't even say that. It's tough.
word of mouth is probably the best way that I've seen so far,
Yeah, I
but
was
then you
gonna
have to
say that.
find a person that actually knows, has been through divination. It's like, okay, yeah, he has some idea of what he's doing, or she has some idea of what he's
Right,
doing. But
right.
if you do happen to go through the process, there are a couple things that you can look out for, especially if you are present
Yeah.
for like in front of the diviner, even if you're on film, like if you're doing a video. There's some things you can kind of see. So one of the things is there should be chanting of verses. It should not
Mm.
necessarily be Orisha says that, Ifa says this, you need to go here, without any type of justification verse behind it.
Right.
So, but that's not to say that the diviner is actually all wrong and it's all wrong. Because sometimes they will still chant the verse. The verse may be like pretty straightforward, but typically, in the best of my knowledge, there's always going to be some type of chanting. Um, Divinations are typically always going to come in some type of a blessing or some type of misfortune. Is another thing to look out for. So, if they should tell you if that blessing or if that odu comes in a blessing or
The
if it calls for
orientation.
investigation. Yeah, the
Okay.
orientation. They should let you know the orientation. Um, and sometimes they won't always let you know the exact orientation. I've seen this sometimes. Um, I preferably do give the exact orientation, but I've seen people where they don't, but it doesn't hinder the reading at all. You know, so it's kind of tricky. Other than that, without trying to actually teach any type of process, that's probably the best way. Yeah, it's very difficult to actually tell whether someone is or not. But typically, if you have someone that's kind of just blowing through it, just giving you a bunch of Ifa says this, Ifa says that, Ifa says this, Ifa says this, when you're in front of them,
Right.
their mind in front of them. If you're just getting the information, the diviner is not required to chant. There's no point.
Right.
They're not giving it to you right there. So what the chanting is we typically, it's kind of like when we state information. You just can't state information without backing it up with some type of authoritative
Right.
verse behind it or authoritative chant. So for
And this
instance, if,
this
so for
I didn't mean to cut you off, but this is what
yeah,
I compare
excuse me.
EFI to scholarship, and EFI when we say it's knowledge based, because just like we have references for things in archaeology or science, it's the same thing with EFI. You have an authoritative verse behind it. So if a divine is claiming something, you're present, like you said, he's going to chant something, and let you know the authoritative verse behind it.
Exactly. And this also happens when explaining about Orisha, just to put it out there. Like if someone says Ogun carries two cutlasses,
Mm-hmm.
so there's a kind of common knowledge that they're actually not cutlasses, but for lack of a better word, um, if someone did not know better, you would actually have to chant the authoritative statement behind that. So if I says Ogun carries 2 cutlasses, I can say Ogun alada meji tomu biina, which is the authoritative line for stating that.
2 cutlasses sharp as fire.
Right. So if I say something like Su is like small like a child, not that he is a child, but his size, how tall he actually is, we can say Baba Kakere or small father, labeling him as a small person. Right. This is probably the reason why a lot of these other systems get confused that he's a child, because he's small like a child.
That's why he's depicted. Man, I didn't put that together. When people like art you see in the diaspora, they always depict him as a child, and I'm like, why do they keep depicting him as a child? Now I get it. That makes sense.
Yeah, because I've heard stories of where like he'll mingle with children, and you won't be able to notice him because of his height.
Right. Okay, so we got a question. What are the least common tools used with divination? I think he's saying what are some, common tools. You just cover Ifa and Erendil Ogun. If I were
you, I think during that time might have been kind of where we had technical difficulties. So to give you some, of course, we have Ifa, which consists of the Opele and the Ikinifa. Then we have the Erendil Ogun or Idasa, which is the 16 cowrie shell divination. While we're actually on 16 cowrie shells, there's 3 cowrie shell divination, there's 4 cowrie shell divination, and I've seen 8 cowrie shell divination.
So one of them has 16, one of them has 8, one of them has 4, and one of them has 3, and they're all different systems.
They're all different systems. Now the 3 shell cowrie system and the 4 shell cowrie system are not the same thing as the Obi-Obata systems. They are different.
So you can cast them and try to go Obion or Ejefe okay, I got you.
So they're different. And if anyone knows anything about this, it's easy to tell. I'm not going to tell. I'll say something, and those who know will understand. If you get Opataku and 4 shells, what exactly do you do?
Crush them.
Then you don't have any divination set. So we also there's water gazing. There's like for Osain, there's a fetish. It's a talking. It whistles like a bird, and the priest will interpret the whistles and whatnot and give the client his information. The Egbe Orun kind of have this sense of going into a trance. Like the client will come, they'll mention whatever they have to mention, and the person will go into a trance, and they'll come back out of that trance and then deliver this information.
Yeah, I don't want none of that smoke. There's some divination systems. I'm gonna stick with the ones I know and grow in those, but some divination systems I don't want no parts of.
Yeah, some are more spiritual based. Not all Orishas are the same. They don't. I think, like I said earlier, we have this cookie cutter type of thing that everything has seashell divination. Everyone has the same type of this, and it's just not true.
Yeah, I think Egbe has the most diversity.
Especially when it comes to coconut and
they got a lot of stuff.
Yeah, they got
orange peel slices. They got a lot
oranges,
of stuff.
Peanuts, coconuts, sugar cane.
They got a lot of
stuff.
There's
a bunch of them.
I don't. Egbe is a different beast.
Altogether, yes.
It's not like a side.
I don't even think Egbe is actually an Orisha, but that's another story, another topic for a different day.
I'd say Irumale.
I'm not even going to get into it.
You're not doing it? I tried to bait you.
Nope, not doing that.
Sister Jonelle, who I think is in Sierra Leone right now. If you are, I sure appreciate you tuning in from over there. Hope your trip was pleasant. I enjoyed the pictures and videos. She says, so people wearing all those beads are often practices of regla de ocha. I didn't know that. I always wondered. I'll let you take that one. You said, "Yep."
Yeah. Well, it's hard because if you throw on the Brazilian like candomblé and the different aspects, they sometimes wear a lot of necklaces. But if you're really talking about the United States, Cuba and the islands, yes, most of it seems to be very influenced by Regal de Ocha through osmosis, if it's some type of blend or hybrid.
And I would say, not that Africans don't wear multiple beads, but a specific set. And if you've seen them, you know the set that I'm talking about. You just probably haven't counted it. It's a set of either 5 or even sometimes 7. Let's see if I can. You remember all that come with it? I know it's Obatala.
Yeah. Well, hold on. Well, fundamentally, from my understanding, it was 4 originally. Then it became 5
now. Well, so who was added? Nowadays, who was the 5th person?
Eshu.
Of course.
Nowadays, people are getting 7, 9. I really don't even want to talk about necklaces because I have kind of this pet peeve about them. Because now they more look like costume jewelry than they actually look like necklaces nowadays. And I don't I do. People's imaginations. Like, I've seen so many changes from when I have started. Even in Regal de Ocha, it's crazy. And one of the biggest ones have been necklaces. They have just gone off the deep end. Oh, and another thing, sometimes in Nigeria, people don't wear necklaces all the time or that are associated with Òrìṣà. They have different necklaces that are sort of values, some chieftaincy beads, some beads that are worn by kings. So it's just not always an insignia when you see a bead.
Right. I would say the standard 5, from what I can remember, is
I'll tell you that Obatala, Osun, Shango, Yemonja, and Eshu.
Yep. If you see any others, they've probably received something else, and now they wear that bead as well. But to get them together, or what he was talking about earlier, the Ileke ceremony, from what I've seen, is usually the standard 5.
Yeah. And another thing, just to throw out there, since we're speaking about necklaces and various Òrìṣà, there's a necklace called the seven African powers. I would just like to notify people. This is not an Òrìṣà system. This is a spiritual-based system. Has nothing to do with Òrìṣà. Though nowadays they've kind of changed the color. Yeah, it does now. But originally, this was not the thought. This was not the process. The 7 African powers is its own base spiritual system. Made very popular by the Puerto Ricans in New York.
All right, brother. Wait a minute, Mr. Riggs. Is this Mr. Riggs from Black Ice TV? If it is, let me know. Said he'll be in Nigeria soon. In the house of Ogun. Which part are you going to, brother? Let us know. We got people everywhere. Let us know.
I'm assuming he's going for initiation.
I assume.
Okay.
Maybe he can let us know.
Cool. I will be in Nigeria.
Saneb said, "I'm good with 4 lobes for now." I bet you are. Good question. Good question.
What's that?
He says, "What about the 3 warriors of Òrìṣà?" I know what he's talking about. Come on, you know what he's talking about.
I know he's talking about the warriors themselves. Okay, again, this is from the Cuban system. If we're gonna call something warriors, most likely it's gonna be from the Cuban-based system of Regal de Ocha. And what you typically get here, and this will depend, because in the olden days, from my understanding, only Babalaos gave out warriors, and this is why you would normally give the small Osun with the rooster and bells on it. It seemed to be later on they changed it for other Òrìṣà priests to give out the warriors, and they didn't have the Osun. But typically, what they call an Elegua comes with it, or what we would know as an Eshu. Of course, the pot itself and the 9 implements, one of them being an ofa or the bow and arrow that represents Oshosi. This is typically how they're given out in the Cuban system. And there might be some kind of relevance or this might actually stem from something older. Because when I particularly give out Ogun, the way that I was taught to, we do give out Ogun, but there's other Orishas that you can access through Ogun. I'm not going to get into how that works and whatnot, but the shrine itself is called Ogun. It's not to say that Oshosi is going to be in that shrine, though Oshosi we might have an implement in it. It doesn't make it Oshosi. It just makes it Ogun. And it's the same thing with the warrior. Though I have seen some people kind of take out the bow and arrow and put it in its own separate dish, and then sometimes put it back in the pot in its own separate dish. Regardless, it's still Ogun, because Oshosi, you can receive Oshosi by itself.
Yeah.
Whether that's in the Cuban system or in Isheshe.
But to answer this question, we don't particularly do warriors.
Yeah, we don't do
West
warriors.
African narrative. Okay, got another question. Put it on the screen. Do devotees seek out societies of Orisha that guides their head? Is that the job of a Babalawo? If you choose to learn as a priest. Woo! Loaded question there. That's all you, brother.
Oh, man. Okay, so let's back up for a second. I need to explain how things are done there before I jump into this. So to keep it simply, in West Africa, Orishas are based in families. What I mean by that is you are born into an Orisha. You're born worshiping an Orisha by default because every family has a lineage divinity. Of course, we don't have that here. So let me clear up also another terminology. The guiding of your head or head Orisha does not make sense because there is an already Orisha of your head called Ori. I'm going to leave that where it's at. Let's see, in the job of the Baal, is it the choosing? So in the diaspora, when people sometimes go to get a divination done, and they want to know, quote unquote, what their head is, or it should really be said what Orisha is best for them to worship than saying, what is my head Orisha? Because this is really what you're implying. This is what you're asking. What Orisha is best for you to worship according to your lot in your life? So any diviner, whether it's a Babalawo or 16-card shell diviner, can do this. I even would say, though I'm not completely sure, but I would assume even the Colonut divination, where it comes to consultation, this can be done in as well. So whatever the diviner is, I wouldn't say it's their responsibility, but if you ask during divination for what Orisha is best for you, they will be able to tell you. Now, did I actually answer her question?
Yes, I believe you did.
Okay.
If there's a follow-up question, let us know. Okay, that is Mr. Riggs from Black Ice TV. Peace, brother. I know you represent the UK, and he is a child of Ogun. Didn't know that today. You know my motto. You know my motto.
Yeah, I know your motto.
The more Ogun children, the better. That's my motto. I don't care who feels what about it. That is my motto. All right. So if we don't have any more inquiries, I'm gonna go ahead and shut it down. I'll give it a few minutes here. But as I said earlier, check out the links in the description. We got a lot of stuff out. We got 19 books and counting as a Masi Warrior clan. I don't know who's going to break that 20th. I think it's going to be Kofi. I think he's working on his solo book, as I'm working on my solo book, as Brother Nahisi is working on his solo book, as Brother Unk is working on his second solo book. So we're probably going to be at this. We're we're probably going to be at this 24, and I believe Brother Sean is working on his solo book. So I think we're going to be at 25 books, and I'm going to have to do a whole new graphic because I did a graphic with all of our books to show people, you know, and it's 19 of them on there, but it looks like I'm going to have to do a whole new graphic by this year's end.
Man, y'all got a lot of writing going on over there.
Hey, we like to be amongst the immortals, as
Hey,
I
I'm
like
not
to say, because when you write and leave your thoughts behind for the next generation, and they can communicate and see your point of view, you become immortal. Because we'll always talk about you, always read about you, always have you in our lips, in our minds, just like we do Odu in our tradition. You know, these are the immortals amongst us. Our divinities are the immortals. We will talk about them until we expire. Infinite Minds with a question. How do you start worshiping to worship your divinities? And I don't want you to answer that question because we've already done an entire video on it. So search this channel and you will find a video entitled How to Start in Isheshe.
Oh, okay.
And since I got you on Facebook, brother, so I will send you that video personally. We kind of went over everything in that and the steps to take. And if you need to get in contact with me, you want to get in contact with Ogundiran, you know, you got my information. So I will send you that video, brother. There's another question for people who receive a reading, and let's say Shango guides their head, and they are not an Arumila.
Mm-hmm.
How would they learn the worship and divination system of Shango?
Okay. Well, if you want a perfect world, you would learn from Shango devotees. Considering you were and you would learn the 16 card shell divination if that is what you were trying to well, that's his divination system if you were trying to specialize in that. Now, if that's the way if that's the way it's set up, I would say this: you're not going to learn 16 card shell immediately, and you shouldn't try. Mm-hmm. There's so much fundamental stuff that you have to learn just to worship an Òrìṣà. Then if you want to, if you want to decide to learn more, become initiated, and then after you're initiated, you want to become a priest. After you get your learn some more about a priest, those are normally, at least with Shango, comes within, like, from my understanding, like specializations. Now you can learn it, but don't expect to learn it like within 2 or 3 years. Seashell divination is going to take anyone between 7 to 10 years to get. It's a long process. It's not an easy one. And then with Shango, Shango's extra. For those who know how to worship Shango, people will know what I mean.
Yes.
And he's extra in all other kind of ways. He's very interesting when it comes to funeral rites of his devotees. There's just a whole lot of extra stuff. Even when it comes to so a lot of times in Regal de Ocha, they'll say that once you get initiated to Orunmila, you can't get initiated to any of the Òrìṣà. They believe they got this from Shango, because Shango is like this. You can initiate 40 Òrìṣà before Shango, but once you initiate to Shango, you're really not supposed to be initiated to any other Òrìṣà. And then like 2 Shango practitioners or 2 people that are initiated to Shango can't marry one another. Shango has you can't smoke if you're Shango. You know, Shango's just extra. And so about the smoking,
please, because I'm gonna get so many messages about that.
It's not the actual smoking that does it. It's the smoke. And it's kind of like you're mocking Shango and what his elegans do when they eat fire and smoke comes from their mouth. So the devotees of Shango are not allowed to smoke, period. Anything that kind of smoke that comes from you, you're not doing it. Whether it's a cigarette, whether it's herb, whether it's whatever you're smoking. No, you're really not allowed to smoke. But yeah, typically you would want to be trained by Shango people. Now, if you can't find that, you need to find someone, and it can probably go in different levels. You can find someone that knows how to worship Shango and then learn from them, but they might not be able to carry you further than knowing how to worship Shango. So just because it's still knowledge, sometimes some people have deeper knowledge of other Orisha other than the Orisha they're in, and they can provide a little more knowledge and guidance with that Orisha, but at some point they'll have to drop off and pass that person on to someone else. But typically you want to find someone who at least knows how to worship Shango in the beginning so you can get taught properly on how to worship Shango. But if you could,
can I speak to the worship part? Because
yeah, go ahead.
This man taught me how to worship Ogun, and as a sense taught me how to worship Shango, has taught me how to worship Egungun, has taught me how to worship Ifa. You have to learn how to worship. This is how you communicate with the deity, and this ain't no easy task. It took me like a year before I got all of the signs, all of the rituals, all of the things that you have to do. And then you build upon that knowledge because, like you said, Shango's extra. There's there's things you have to even worship Shango. Like you have to have things physically to worship Shango. Without it, they'll look at you funny. They're like, this isn't even, where is your instrument of worship for Shango? So and it's pretty much when you talk about learning to worship, that's all divinities via the kola nut system. You have to learn how to worship, and it's not going to take you as long as 16 calorie shells, but it's going to take you a while. It took me a year before I could confidently do it by myself.
Okay. Yeah. I would add on to that. Though it took you a year to do, I would say, yeah, it took you all the year to get the information, divine properly, but a whole lot more after that year to really get comfortable.
Yeah.
Divining.
Yeah, because you add stuff on, depending on the divinity. They're every divinity has their own little ritual and things you must do, whether it's greeting the right and left, whether it's a spiral, whether it's whatever. It's something. So, you have to learn those too. So
whether it's standing up,
it's
sitting down,
standing up,
down,
kneeling,
shaking your
stooping
butt.
over, even shaking your butt with some divinities. I'm gonna get a message off that. I know it. But
you will.
you had to say that. You had to say that. Which one do you shake your butt? Women do not email me about twerking in front of Òrìṣà shrines. I swear to God. I don't want to know. Do not do this. So yeah, it's very detailed. It's very something that you have to practice over and over and over and over and over. I bought myself shells just to practice, because you have to practice this. This is not something that's going to stick in your head. It's already in a different language. So, and that's the other thing. You got to learn to say this in Yoruba. You can't say this stuff in English.
Some stuff is required in Yoruba, other stuff isn't.
A lot of it is in Yoruba.
And then in other platforms outside Orisha, like medicine, it's almost a given you have to speak, or at least be understood.
Yeah.
So
you're not going to get away. You're not going to get away from Yoruba. So, speaking to what you said earlier about judging a priest on its merit, if you're present, you ain't hearing no Yoruba. I would say that's a red flag.
At least, now that this is not how I typically teach, but at least as a standard, the oriki should be in Yoruba, if nothing else. If nothing else, that should at least be. And just to piggyback off you earlier, colon divination when it comes to any Orisha is fundamental. Without it, you're not going to go anywhere. It is the most fundamental thing in this tradition. And it's what suffices as your communication between you and that divinity. It is absolutely fundamental.
See what you did?
And
You see what you did? Look on the screen. You see what you did?
what the warriors? No warriors? Yeah, no
You're
warriors.
breaking people's hearts.
It's just called Ogun, no warriors.
Yeah, that's. Oh boy, I'm gonna get some messages. Anyway, if there are no more questions, I don't want this to run too long. We'll go ahead and shut it down. Thank you all for coming out. We got well, after this, I'm sure we'll come up with another topic. I don't like to do shows just to do shows. I do shows when, we're talking and something comes about, or I see something in the community, or, it's something that I've learned that I want to, get to you guys. I need to start back doing presentations. I haven't done one in a while, but
You can always do another poll.
I could do another poll. So yeah, let's do that. Okay, so on this YouTube channel, I'm gonna put a question up here with a couple of topics, and you guys choose what you want the next topic to be. Right. I think that way, it's best for you guys.
You might also want to take some of the see what if anyone's interested in providing any topics, because sometimes being on the other side, you really don't think the same way.
Right. We're so used to thinking a certain manner.
Like I know one topic that I know personally that probably really should be talked about is the idea of cooking for Orisha, because very few people do it. And with some Orisha, you can get away with it for a while, but with other Orisha, oh God, it's predominantly
don't cook.
So people don't realize that
Ikuru, Akara, Amala. You gonna cook something?
No, you can cook something.
You gonna cook something? It's just a matter.
And even when you divine, when you do Riru, you have to know how to make echo. So there's so many things that come. So many things that come within worship. Even the sacrificial of animals and the butchering of them. Taking what needs to be taken out. All this is part of training. So there's just so much to learn that it takes a while. It's I would say anyone that's in the tradition, don't rush. There's no point.
Yeah, there's no point of rushing. There's no point of rushing. Trust me, you're gonna wanna get in there and all that comes with that, but you're only gonna be hurting yourself at the end. It's no rushing. You cannot rush learning this stuff.
And one more thing that I wanted to put out there, just as a though I know in the diaspora, particularly, I can't speak on anywhere, but basically like North America, the United States, where I see it the most, and the Caribbean. There normally there is no kind of like, what do you call it? There's no apprenticeship program for divination. Especially when we get into like the Ifa divination and the Eregun divination, where they have rituals set up for apprenticeship. And I know because we haven't been exposed to it as much, and we've mostly been exposed by osmosis by the Cuban tradition. I would hope to see as the years go along that people people try to find people to actually now go under apprenticeship with, because it's very important. There is no way on God's green earth you are going to learn divination by a book. You might be able to pull it off and know how to divine, but you are no way going to understand all the ins and outs and ups and downs of it by a book. Because so much of it is not written, and so much of it is not given a clue to. You know, even in the translating of the some of the verses, a lot of people don't realize some of it's coded. So even if a native Yoruba speaker speaks it, they don't know what they're exactly saying. They may understand the language, but they don't understand what it's trying to convey. This is all taught. So the apprenticeship program is fundamental, you know, and it is a ritual. It's not like you say, hey, I just want to take an apprenticeship and you pay money and it's done. There's actually a ritual that goes with it. You know, so it's very important, at least in my eyes. I would hope to see that this comes more to light, that people start asking more about it and start getting really properly trained. Though I know in the diaspora, just because of our lack of exposure, as more information comes out, I would hope, you know, that people start gravitating toward wanting to be properly trained instead of kind of like seminar trained. Well, I'll just go and see someone and then I'll learn a bit of information, then I'll pull a book over here and I'll get this, or I'll talk to this person, because you're really not going to get it. And I speak from experience on both sides of that argument. So I am, you know, it's a lot different when you're properly trained, and there's so much more information that's given to you. But it also, you need to also remember that it takes time. If you don't have, you know, 7 years to give up learning 16 card shell divination, then you might not want to do it. If you don't have like 15 to 20 years to do E5,
Right.
you know, it takes time. It's not something that's learned overnight or within a year or two.
And there's nothing wrong with being a devotee of these divinities. You know,
absolutely
and what we
not.
mean by devotee is just someone that knows how to worship. You know, somebody that may offer offerings for other people, but you know, you don't go too far outside of that scope, and that's fine. Everybody's not supposed to be a priest.
It's fine just to be a worshiper.
It's fine just to be a singer.
Yeah.
If you just want to sing songs, that's fine.
There's so many things that are in this tradition. The one thing I do not like is ultimately it's in a lot of these systems, you have to pay money to actually be in it, which is so far from the truth, because there's so many things you can learn without even having to worship Orisha. You can be a storyteller. Now learn how to do any ritual in your life.
Drummer.
You can learn how to chant Oriki for several Orisha. You can be an Ajala artist. You know, you can. There's so many things that are part of this tradition that we don't have. Like I said, we have a very like pigeonhole. We see very little of it. But yeah, I would hope, you know, in the near future, particularly when it comes to those divination systems that have Olduan verses, that, you know, that people will start to take the time and get properly trained and go through apprenticeship. It is worth it. You will learn so much more than what you can find in any book ever written.
Okay, this is the last question before we go.
Okay.
And I'm going to let you read it.
What about numbers in Orisha? Okay, if you're referring to Obatala has this number, Ashun has this number, Shango has this number, no, it doesn't exist in Isheshe. What they're really getting this from is from the 16 Kara shell divination. I don't want to get into, like, okay, so if you have 5 shells is called Oshe, and highly sometimes associated with Oshun. So they'll say, since it's 5 shells, they'll say her number is 5. And that's not true, because you can have the same Odu and have Obatala, but in the Ebo, we're still going to be in increments of 5. This is more something in Regal de Ocha, of where they have like 8 for Obatala, 9 for Oya. Now, this does not mean they don't have any type of number association, but not necessarily with Orisha. For instance, like for Ogun, everyone says Ogun has 7 roads. That's not true. Matter of fact, Ogun doesn't have roads. One. But if you actually look at the literature, the guy actually says the Ogun I know of are 7 in number. It's not that they are 7, it's what he knows is 7 in number. Sometimes 7 is associated with females, and 9 is associated with males. So there is type of number associations, but it's not like where you have a number associated with every divinity. I think that pretty much answers that.
It's not numerology, is what I mean to say. Or
oh no, not at all. And anyone that's kind of telling you that is either doesn't know themselves, trying to sell you something, or it's mixed.
all right, we're gonna shut it on down. But specifically, I have a video on this channel called Regla de Ocha's influence on Òrìṣà practices in America. And I think the listening audience can glean a lot from that, because we go over a lot of these types of things that you may be aware of or you may not be. So we're going to shut it down. Thank you all for coming out. I'm going to put that poll up on this channel so you all can decide our next video. Baba Ogundiran, you got anything before we close out?
Nope. That's it. Thank all of y'all for watching. We'll see you next time around.
All right. And I will greet you in the, well, I will leave you in the Yoruba language. Odabo, which means goodbye.
Odabo.
Odabo.